So I write for people to say, hey, that was really a cool book. I really enjoyed it. I really was faked out by that clue. That's great. I can't wait to read your next one. It's like to solve the puzzle. So to me, that's the great reward. And when people write reviews to answer your question and they say things like that, that inspires me to keep going. And so I do appreciate those 5-star reviews. It also helps with the Amazon algorithms because then more people will see it. And I mean, Amazon is just like the beast. It's like Godzilla stomping the earth. More people buy books on Amazon than in bookstores. So, I mean, I've had people buy my book in Japan, Argentina, Israel, all around the world. They would never get a chance to be exposed to it if it was the old-fashioned days and my book was just in the bookstore. So Amazon has its detractors, it has its flaws, but it certainly helps a new author like me.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an amazing guest on the show today, and I'm excited to have him here. If you've ever been in love with 1980s soap operas, right, and you're like, oh, I would love to talk to somebody or hear somebody tell stories about that, stay tuned. If you want to talk to an author who is also a lawyer and has that background, stay tuned for that. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about today on the podcast, and AX Foster's here with us. And I'm excited to talk about not just one book, but two. And I'm excited to have him here. AX, welcome back to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
This is great. Tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours.
I'm calling from the Washington, D.C. area, the state of Maryland, and that's where I've resided for many years, just outside Washington, D.C.
There you go. That's where everything's happening in the next few days, right? A lot of changes happening in your side of the world.
Yes, well, you know, being a lawyer in Washington, D.C. is good because there's always a lot of criminals around here.
We'll let you fill in the blanks as you listen to that statement. Yes. I'm glad to have you here. I mentioned your background. You have been part of that whole 1980s soap opera scene. I got to know. All right, tell me a little bit about how did that happen for you to get involved in that? And can you take us behind the scenes of what that was like back in those days to do that?
Sure, I'm happy to. I've enjoyed several totally different careers. My first career was as a professional actor, and then I went to law school and became a lawyer, and I was a prosecutor for 20 years, and then a criminal defense attorney, and now I'm a novelist as I approach my retirement. But going back to my theater days, I was an acting major in college. And when I graduated, I went to New York City to try and become an actor. And I was lucky enough to be cast in a couple of soap operas. The first one I did was called Ryan's Hope. It's no longer on the air. And because of my work on Ryan's Hope, I got to be in dozens more episodes, but I don't want to make too much of it because mostly I had no lines or I had a couple of lines like, you know, as a waiter or a delivery man or a bartender or some insignificant background role. But I was able to keep it going for 7 years from college to law school. And I did a lot of acting in New York City. I was on Ryan's Hope, One Life to Live, As the World Turns, Search for Tomorrow, in mostly bit parts. But it was a lot of fun in those days.
What did you learn by being a part of that?
Well, you know, you have to memorize your lines real quickly. So having a sharp memory is a good tool. And, you know, being an actor in New York it can be difficult because you're on TV and then the next day you're unemployed. And then you're on, you know, a TV commercial and you make money. They send you residual checks, but then you have no health insurance. So it was a tough process in the beginning, but I was lucky enough to get into the 3 major acting unions in the late 70s, early 80s, which would be Actors Equity, the Screen Actors Guild, and AFTRA, the American Federation of TV and Radio Artists. Once I got in those unions, I had a little more protection, and I had health insurance and other benefits. So I was able to keep it rolling until I got kind of disenchanted with all of that stuff and decided to go to law school.
So, okay, why law school? What was the appeal for you to go in that direction?
Well, that's a great question. I had signed a contract with an agency, and I thought it was very unilateral and one-sided. And I got interested in the legal issues involved representing artists and actors and musicians. And I wanted to be a sports and entertainment lawyer. And back in those days, becoming a sports agent was like a new idea. This is the pre-Michael Jordan days. And there was a whole new area of law, sports and entertainment law. And I thought I would be an agent for various performing artists and authors or what have you. And so I went to law school actually to get into more of the management end of the entertainment world. I saw myself at a TV network or a movie studio or something like that. But when I got to law school, I took a complete hairpin turn, and I became fascinated with criminal law and the idea of doing a jury trial and the theatricality of being in a courtroom. And I felt very comfortable presenting cases based on my training as an actor. And then I did an internship at the DA's office in the area where I went to law school. And I actually did a jury trial before I graduated from law school under a rule they had there that allowed third-year law students to actually be like an assistant prosecutor. And I loved it. I thought it was so cool to not only do this performance and convince people of my position, but to help people, which is something you don't do in the entertainment world much. So I really enjoyed helping victims of crime. And when I got out of law school, I decided to become a prosecutor. And I didn't think I'd be doing it for the next 20 years, but that's what happened.
It's amazing how people find their path in life, and all of these things kind of lead to each other, and they all have a hand to play in your path, even though they seem a little disconnected in the moment. It's kind of nice to kind of see how your path led you to where you are.
Yeah, well, think of many streams sort of converging into a confluence, a river. That's how I see all these different parts of my background, my writing, my acting. A lot of my book sounds like a play because it's a courtroom and you have questions and answers and dialogue. So I think my acting and stage background really helped with writing the courtroom scenes. And also being a lawyer is about standing up in front of a group of strangers in a jury context and trying to get them to see your point of view. So there are some similarities. Now, when you're in a courtroom, you're not taking on a character and a role, but you communicate with an audience in a way. And how you do all that, your gestures, your movement is similar in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, there are parallels between the stage and a courtroom. And I definitely tried to use my training to help me in both contexts.
How does the ability to read the room, to read the jury, how does that play into how you do what you do? That's got to be a skill that a lot of people need to learn how to do. It doesn't come naturally. Just to see and understand if the audience is following along with where you're leading them. How does that work?
I mean, that's so true. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a courtroom listening to a lawyer on the other side just drone on and on and on about something insignificant. And I'm looking at the jury and they're like yawning and closing their eyes. And the other lawyer's totally unaware, oblivious to the fact that he's lost his audience. I'm one of those courtroom advocates. I was constantly staring at the jury. And if they nodded their head in agreement or if they crossed their arms, the body language. And also when you pick a jury, you have to, at least in Maryland, you don't get a lot of information and you're not allowed to interview them the way you are in some states. That process is called voir dire. And particularly in my first book, Gavel to Gavel, I devote 2 whole chapters to the selection of the jury because I think people are interested in that process. And most of us have been called for jury duty, whether we get picked or kicked off or what have you. But it's a weird experience that you're alien to. You're not familiar with the rules. And I used to look at people and try to draw clues from everything. If they brought a book to court, what was it? Their dress, how they dressed. If some guy showed up in shorts, and a baseball cap, I was like, well, he's not real serious about this. Or any kind of clues with body language. Did they want to be there or not? If they didn't want to be there, that's a bad sign. But also, if they really wanted to be there, that was a little scary too. It's like, why is this person so hyped up about judging another? So you do tend to read the body language clues, look for eye contact, and all those sorts of little details. Because your audience, as we discussed in the first question, you're talking to an audience, you need to know who they are. And if you pick a bunch of bad jurors, it doesn't matter what you're going to say, they're not going to go your way. So that's a very important phase of the criminal jury trial that a lot of people don't know much about. And a lot of books, legal thrillers, don't cover. So I really try to focus on that stuff too.
The amount of things happening in the courtroom it's kind of like a live version of chess between you and the other attorney as you argue both sides. You have the jury, you have the judge, you have everyone in the room. You have all these different things that are kind of inputs that are happening in real time, and you have to balance them all. And again, sometimes you don't know what's coming, and you get a curveball, and you have to react. You have to know your facts. You have to know case law. You have to have all this information at your fingertips. I'm curious on how you guys learn all of that and keep it all in balance and in check in the moment. Because there's not a lot of time where you can hit pause and go and do research and come back. You have to know this stuff in real time.
Yeah, some of it is learnable and some of it is not. And you're born with it. An analogy I've heard that kind of rings true to me is like a prize fighter. You can be a boxer and you can train and do calisthenics and shadow box and hit the bag and do all this preparation. But as Mike Tyson famously said, once you get hit in the mouth, there go all your plans. Right. So it's kind of like that in a courtroom. You prepare, sometimes you over-prepare. You know what your witnesses are going to say, you hope, and you have analyzed the law and the facts, and you're ready to prepare the trial for presentation. But sometimes crazy things happen, and you have to be able, just like the fighter, to improvise and to adjust and go down a new path. The famous saying is a lawyer should never ask a question they don't know the answer to. That is mostly correct in my 35 years of experience, but often you have to just roll with it. And when a witness says something that's weird or odd or inculpatory, you have to follow that. And maybe you ask some questions you don't know the answer to because you're improvising with a goal in mind. So it's a complicated process. I will say the more you do it, the better you get at it. In the beginning, when you're a brand new rookie prosecutor, it's terrifying as you're fumbling around and you don't really know what to do. But then you do your first drunk driving case and you're like, okay, I get it. Yeah. And then you do another and you're like, oh, it's kind of like the last one I did. And then they all start to fall into these formulas. But I've done everything from drunk driving to death penalty murder case and sexual assaults, child abuse, animal cruelty. Those were the areas that I really specialized in as a prosecutor here.
When we look at Hollywood and we look at television and movies, is there a movie or a television series that kind of captures more realistically what it is like to be a lawyer, where some are kind of like more Hollywood version of what you do?
I would say almost all of them are fictitious Hollywood versions. Okay. And I mean, they're constricted by time, like Law and Order. Many of my readers are devotees of the TV series Law and Order. And I mean, a complex trial is solved in 60 minutes, and it just doesn't go that way. But of all the movies I've seen, a couple jump out at me. I'm going to mention three. A very important movie to the young A.X. Foster was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
I watched that movie with Gregory Peck playing Atticus Finch, and that's basically a legal thriller in that the central plot line of To Kill a Mockingbird is a trial of Tom Robinson for raping a woman down in old-time Alabama. That book and then the movie had a significant impact on me and me wanting to be a lawyer. The second movie that jumped to mind is an old black and white film called 12 Angry Men. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with it, but it's an old movie about a jury in a jury room with Henry Fonda. And it's a murder. And the first time they go around the room, everyone says the kid is guilty, except Henry Fonda. So you're 11-1 in the jury room. And with no spoiler alerts, the rest of the movie is what happens as the jurors discuss the case and minds get changed. That movie, I've never been on a jury. I always get kicked off, obviously. But I've seen enough. I've had over 100 jury trial cases myself. So I've talked to a lot of jurors afterwards, like why they did what they did. And so it's kind of interesting. That movie shows the inside of a jury room. The third movie that captures some of what we do realistically, I would cite The Lincoln Lawyer with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Of course, it spins a little bit out of control, but there are some scenes where Matthew McConaughey is questioning witnesses, and darn if I didn't say to myself, that's pretty close to the way we do it. And so that one jumps out for me of all the ones out there.
Yeah, that's my wife and I watch every episode of that. I like it because they really do kind of put you behind the scenes and kind of give you some exposure to that. I would love for you to do something special for the audience, AX. I would love for you to talk to us as if we're in the jury area, and you can approach us, and I want you to unpack for us why we should read Gavel to Gavel, as if we're in the jury and you're there presenting to us. Can you present to us why this book is something that we should read?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your attention during the course of this trial. We really appreciate it. I want to highlight a couple of salient points for you to consider most prominently. The first would be this book. I read this book called Gavel to Gavel by a legal thriller writer named A.X. Foster. If you're interested in how a trial really works from the inside view of a prosecutor in a big suburban prosecutor's office, this is a good book for you. It takes a murder trial from start to finish, from gavel to gavel. And it starts with the murder. A wealthy woman has been accused of murdering her husband. And then it takes us through the investigation of the crime, the charging of it, the courtroom scenes. First, you have motions practice, something that most legal thrillers don't even discuss, motions to suppress and so forth. Then you have jury selection. You have the presentation of the state's case. Then you have cross-examination. Then you have the defense case. Then you have the cross-examination of the defense witnesses, closing arguments, and all the way to a jury's verdict. If you want to feel like you're on a jury without having to go downtown and go to the courthouse and go through all that hassle, you can pick up this book and you become like a member of the jury as the case is presented to you. And then you get your own vote and you see if your vote, guilty or not guilty, comports with the one in the book. Highly recommended.
Order in the court.
And that's how you do that. I love it. I feel like I was in the courtroom with you. That's amazing, AX. I love that. So you have Gavel to Gavel. When did that book come out?
Gavel to Gavel came out in 2023, so we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of it. And it's been out there. It's up on Amazon right now. And after I wrote Gavel to Gavel and I got a good response to it, I decided to write the second book in this series. And that took 2024, and we just turned into 2025. So it's coming out February 10th. You can buy both books on Amazon. Just go AX Foster, and it will pop up right to my page. And it took, I will say this, the second book took less time than the first because I knew what I was doing, and I became a better writer by doing it every day. You know, they talk about that 10,000 hours of doing anything. You can learn to play the guitar or speak French or what have you. If you devote 10,000 hours to an activity, you become proficient at it. And I probably devoted 10,000 hours to writing. And of course I had help. You know, I have a publisher, an editor, a proofreader, people to read it. When I first finished my manuscript to Gavel, I gave it out to a jury of my own friends to read. I picked 12 people, judges, lawyers, family, and they read the manuscript and gave me feedback. And a lot of it was super constructive. I had made several changes to the story and the characters based upon that feedback. Then when I gave it to my publisher, of course, they had some changes to make that I could live with. And and then we went out and there it is. It's published. So the second book is called Double Blind. It features the same protagonist, lead character, who's the prosecutor, Mac McIntyre, in the same courthouse. They're both part of the Seneca County Courthouse series. I'm working on book 3 now. I want to have 3 at least. But to me, in my mind, it's kind of like a Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew type formula. The same characters, same town, but you could read book 15 of the Hardy Boys and then book 6. I mean, you don't have to read them in order. Each one is standalone, but they're all familiar to you. It's just a different mystery. That's how it is with my series. The same prosecutor, same courthouse, same boss. I get into a lot of office politics, but a different case, a different judge, a different defense attorney, different witnesses, and so on. So that's the formula. It's kind of like a legal thriller, Hardy Boys. And, I say I've got 3 of them for sure. Where we go from there depends on my readers and the reaction they get. But as long as people enjoy the stories, I'll probably keep writing them.
Talk more about that main character. What do we need to know about this character as we start reading your books?
Well, so many people have asked me, are you Mac McIntyre? You sure sound a lot like Mac McIntyre. Well, I'm not 6'3", and I don't have bright red hair. So, I mean, there are some differences. But honestly, a lot of Mac is me. I would call him an anti-hero. He's not a hero. He's kind of a sketchy prosecutor. And if you read Gavel to Gavel, you'll see that he cuts some corners. He's got some, he's not the perfect guy. He's got a lot of flaws. And I think that makes for an interesting character. So a lot of it is based on me, but I wouldn't do all the things that Mac McIntyre does. And a lot of the office politics are based on problems that I had with colleagues and bosses and supervisors. And, being part of the government in a big agency like that is really like going into a labyrinth. And I wanted to get some of that across to the readers. But it's very realistic. And the authenticity of the books is something I really wanted to do. And my readers have given me feedback on that and say that, how you explained hearsay, that was really cool. Or how you explained like inadmissible evidence, or what a hung jury is, or what a motion to suppress, a motion to identify. All of those things are a little bit foreign to most people. And I try to educate as well as tell the story of the murder trial.
So as a reader, you don't have to have a deep knowledge of legal proceedings to understand what's happening in your stories.
No, and in fact, I include a glossary of terms in the back of both books, because a lot of the language we use in court is Latin, like annali perseque, that means to drop a case, or voir dire, that comes from French, it means to pick a jury. But I have a glossary in the back, And also I reference famous criminal cases here and there. I talk about the Lindbergh kidnapping, and I talk about, the Rosenbergs who were electrocuted for espionage, and Jack the Ripper and so forth. When people use those or reference those cases in the book, I give a little background in the glossary of terms so that if anyone is unfamiliar with those things, they can quickly look them up.
All right. What's the difference between writing in a legal profession and writing a novel? What's really different for you?
Interesting. And I'm very proud that I won an award for my legal writing when I was in law school.
Nice.
Everyone's like, well, we know you won awards for talking, but it's a very fine-tuned, rigid style of writing when you write a legal brief. And everything needs to be supported and corroborated with a cite. So you may say something like, in Maryland, prior to 2020, there were no felony animal cruelty statutes. Then you have to put a citation.
Right.
Maryland law, blah, 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 blah. And with each sentence almost, you have to authenticate what you're writing. A novelist can make stuff up, left, right. You're free to do whatever you want. Legal writing, you're not. Everything you say has to be accurate and corroborated by like another case or another law. So it's difficult writing, but I think my writing to add a little more flair than that super dry writing that you read in case law. I always try to bring in things like Shakespeare or things that were interesting to me, or literary allusions, or, analogies, stuff that would make it more readable. So, there's a big difference, but you're writing. You have to sit down at a computer and put your fingers on the keyboard and translate the thoughts in your mind into words and type them out.
One of the objections you hear quite often in TV and movies is leading the witness. So do you see you as an author as leading a reader as you write? Is that the same type of thing that's happening when you lead a witness and lead a reader? Is it kind of the same thing? And if so, how do you navigate that?
Well, when you have an objection like, Your Honor, counsel's leading the witness, that doesn't really mean directing them to talk about something in a certain way. What it means is the form of the question. If I said, Dave, you and I are doing a podcast right now, yes or no? And you would say, yes, that's leading the witness because I'm giving you the answer in the form of a question. Now, a non-leading question would be like, Dave, can you describe what we're doing now? And then you're like, well, we're doing a podcast. I've got this guy on the other side. I'm here, you there. So you're really objecting in a courtroom to the format of the question. And that can be very, very important. Like, let's do a hypothetical. You see a car crash, and you couldn't ask a witness, Madam Witness, it was the green car that ran into the red car, wasn't it? Yes. Objection, leading question.
Yeah.
And rephrase. And then I'd say, which car hit the other first? Or described the accident. Yeah. So it's really just blocking the other side's ability to lead the witness, which means feeding them the answer in the question.
So as you write your novels, then are you creating the space for us to come to our own conclusions, or are you leading us?
Yes, no, I definitely want to put my reader in the position of the 13th juror. And when they read Gavel to Gavel and Double Blind, I want them to say, ooh, well, that evidence is damaging. I included DNA report, for example, in Gavel to Gavel. And it shows that the blood of the victim is very damaging to the defendant, or where it's located. And, so I don't lead them like, keep reading this book because she's going to be guilty, or keep reading this book because she's going to be not guilty. I keep presenting the evidence as if the reader was a juror, and it's very evenly balanced. So some is like inculpatory, tending to go towards guilt, and some is exculpatory, tending to go towards innocence. and very up and down, just like a real trial. Sometimes we do, I've done many trials where like I had no idea which way the jury was going to go because it was a very evenly balanced case. If it's an overwhelming case, a confession, videotape, DNA, ballistics, fingerprints, if it's a very strong case, usually those result in guilty pleas. If it's a very weak case, nobody saw anything, no forensic evidence, the victim is incapable of testifying, then we usually, we won't go to court with a case that's going to lose. So it's pretty fair to say that any jury trial involves a case that's more equally balanced where both sides have a chance to win.
What is fun for you as an author, as you're writing? Do you enjoy like hiding little things into your book that you're waiting for your audience to discover?
Oh, well, one of my favorite authors of all time is Agatha Christie. And I just love her novels and the movies that were made from some of her books, Murder on the Orient Express, and Then There Were None, Death on the Nile. I'm super familiar. I've like studied her opus to learn from her. And she's the grandmaster of the locked room mystery and the hidden clue and the unreliable narrator, and so much she brought to this genre of crime fiction. I try to copy that technique here and there. I drop clues everywhere, but in mystery writing, you want to be fair to your audience. I hate reading these books where like, oh, it was a monkey that swiveled in off the fire escape. I'm like, come on, that's ridiculous. So you don't want to have some crazy endings that nobody could ever figure out. The readers don't like that. On the other hand, you don't want to make it so obvious that from chapter 2, you're like, the butler did it. So you look for a balance in solving the mysteries. And I plant clues everywhere. In fact, my second book, Double Blind, a whole chapter is a single page, which is a note that Mac McIntyre finds in the evidence that half of it is missing because it was water damaged. And he has to figure out what the contents of that note were because it has a tremendous impact on the case. So the readers get a copy of that note with the words and letters missing, and they can go back to it as Mac solves that puzzle and see. That's a very fair way, I think, to present the evidence. You give it to your reader and let them see if they can put it together.
That's interesting to know as a reader, to anticipate that as we read your book, that we can be a part of the story as well. We're not just, passively reading, we're actually in the story with you.
Well, another thing is I have these things, my publisher told me they were called inclusions. It's a publishing term I wasn't familiar with. But in Gavel to Gavel, my first book, I include police report, a DNA report, an autopsy report, and some other things that don't look like traditional pages in a novel. And those are all highly authentic, based on real cases, real police forms that I have access to. And I use them to fictionalize my story. But my readers are like, oh, that was really cool. I noticed in the autopsy report this little detail. And I'm like, very good. I put that in there on purpose. So I plant little clues in those official police reports and so on. And then I also include the jury instructions as a chapter, just as you would get if you were in a courtroom, the definition of presumption of innocence and the definition of beyond a reasonable doubt. And so those things, I think, my readers, and I've been to a couple of book clubs where people have engaged with me and a book signing and so forth, where people tell me what they liked about the book. And those inclusions were particularly noteworthy, and people mention them. And so I kept that technique in book 2. And in book 2, off the top of my head, I think I have a ballistics report, how you match bullets to guns, and some other things like that. Emails, I include a chapter of emails between a judge and the prosecutor, exactly how it would be done in real life, and so forth. So I tried to be super authentic in how I wrote the book, for those people out there that really like courtroom stuff.
Can you give us any sense of what might be coming down the road in book 3 at all at this point?
Yes, I want to write. I don't want to have any spoiler alerts.
No.
But my idea for my third book involves a murder which actually takes place inside a courtroom. And so you've got a limited number of suspects, kind of like a Murder on the Orient Express, but in a courtroom.
Okay.
And that's my idea for my third book, but I'll have to see how that goes. I have a couple of other ideas if people like these legal thrillers in my Seneca County Courthouse series, I'll write one every year or so. But I have a couple other ideas. I have an idea for an historical fiction novel that's set in Luxembourg, of all places. And that's sort of an idea that I've been tinkering around in the back of my mind. A murder mystery set in a time long, long ago when people were living in castles. And so that's a parallel idea I also have.
It's amazing. I'm on your website while we're chatting, AX, and it's a great website. All the information is here with the books. And kind of talk us through your website a little bit for a new person coming to see your site. I see Gavel to Gavel's here. I see press materials and more about you as the author. Any things we should take note of on your website when we come for the first time?
Well, it's easy to find, axfoster.com. And like you say, it has all kinds of things on there. It's getting actually more with the second book releasing in a couple of weeks. So that website will have an upgrade to include both books. Good. There's the area there to contact me if you have any questions. My Facebook page is also very active. I have other social media with Instagram and so forth, but my Facebook page, just put in AX Foster. I welcome any new friends. There's all kinds of photos, videos, cool stuff that I put on my Facebook page. Interesting note about my name. My real name is Alexander Foster, Alex Foster. And that's how I'm known professionally, as Alex Foster. But when we went to register Gavel to Gavel, the Library of Congress told us that there was another Alex Foster who had published materials and had copyrighted the name. So I was like, goodness, I can't even use my own name. So we decided to go with AX Foster. And it kind of has it sticks out a little, and I kind of like it. And so that's my writing name. No turning back now, but that's why it is that AX instead of Alex.
So we talked, as we wrap up here, AX, about Lincoln Lawyer earlier. Do you think, as you're writing your books, do you have a visual component to what you're doing and picturing this maybe turned in and adapted to TV or film? Do you have any of that in the back of your mind as you're writing?
Yeah, definitely. As I say, my background is a theater person. I'm always thinking about what it would look like. I intentionally looked for ways to get parts of the books outside of the courtroom. Otherwise, it looks like a stage play. So, I have chapters that are set inside the jail. I have chapters set inside Mac's apartment. He has a fling with his girlfriend who works at the public defender's office. He has a meeting with his detective outdoors because there's no paranoid about being taped. So I look for ways to broaden it so it's just not indoors in a stodgy courtroom. But most of the book, at least half of it, is courtroom scenes, and the other sections are more visual, like you say, like outdoorsy. So it feels like it's moving around. But that's a pretty good balance, I think, of indoor and outdoor. There's one guy who read my book said there's not enough action. And I'm like, it's not a car chase. This isn't like, a street war or, fist fights. It's a courtroom. You're going to have some decorum and some authenticity with how it's presented. But, Yeah, it's not that kind of book where you're, crashing cars and jumping out of planes. I write about what I know. I didn't write a book about an astronaut going to Mars. I don't know anything about that. And I didn't write a book about a heart surgeon doing a heart transplant. I don't know anything about that, but I wrote about what I know, which is how to prosecute and defend a murder trial.
So let's wrap up with this, AX. I'd love to find out what your answer to this question. You're going into the courtroom to work with your client. You look over at the table beside you, and there is your main character, Mac. You're going up against him one-on-one. How do you prepare against that character from your book in real life if you have the chance to go up against him in the courts?
That's a very formidable challenge. I would say rattle Mac because he's got a little OCD to him. Everything has to be perfect. He also has almost a photographic memory. He doesn't rely on any notes. He can remember the citations, the names of cases. So I would try and rattle him by bringing in something a little bit improvisational to the mix. But Mac McIntyre's a damn good prosecutor, so you better have a good defense when you go up against him.
See, I love that answer. That is great. I love putting you in that context to see how you'd respond. And you did very well. That's awesome. I love that.
Thank you.
AX. Okay, so we're going to go to the website. We'll have all the links in the show notes as always for everyone to connect with you. Congratulations on the new book coming out as well. And we have all the links will be there for everybody to come and support you. One thing before we go, AX, the value of a review from a reader. How important is that for you as an author to have somebody leave you a detailed review when they purchase your books? What does that mean to you to see people's words coming back to you about why they love your book so much?
It's really heartwarming. Gavel to Gavel, if you go to Amazon and you look at the reviews, I think I have 77 5-star reviews.
Amazing.
And I have one 1-star review. And even that lady said, I really enjoyed your book, but then she gave me a 1-star review. So, who knows how it works. Everyone's got an opinion. Some people will like it. Some people will hate it. I don't write for the reviews. I don't write to make money either. I write to tell stories because I'm a natural born storyteller. We talked about my acting, my lawyer, it being in the courtroom, and I've done a lot of teaching. I'm a storyteller, and I like people to enjoy and get, entertainment value and educational value out of my stories. So I write for people to say, hey, that was really a cool book. I really enjoyed it. I really was faked out by that clue. That's great. I can't wait to read your next one. It's like to solve the puzzle. So to me, that's the great reward. And when people write reviews to answer your question and they say things like that, that inspires me to keep going. And so I do appreciate those 5-star reviews. It also helps with the Amazon algorithms because then more people will see it. And Amazon is just like the beast. It's like Godzilla stomping the earth. More people buy books on Amazon than in bookstores.
Yeah.
So, I've had people buy my book in Japan, Argentina, Israel, all around the world. They would never get a chance to be exposed to it if it was the old-fashioned days and my book was just in the bookstore. So Amazon has its detractors. It has its flaws, but it certainly helps a new author like me.
Awesome. Again, congratulations on both books. And I'd love to have you come back in the future, AX. As book number 3 comes down the road, keep me in mind because I know the audience would love to hear an update on that book as it's launched as well. And we're cheering you on here as readers. So thank you so much for making time to do this.
Come on, Canada. Let's get on that list. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.